And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking time to answer our questions today. I'd like to associate myself with the comments that Senator Rubio made about planning for a potential immediate collapse of the Afghan government and security forces. It seemed that as the Taliban was running the table throughout Afghanistan, that the prospect of them continuing to run the table by coming into Kabul was a significant probability that should have been planned for. In your view, Mr. Secretary, has the Taliban abandoned their sympathy and collaboration with groups like Al-Qaeda and the Haqqani network? Do they continue to have the same aim, and are they of like spirit, or has that relationship been severed?
The relationship has not been severed, and it's a very open question as to whether their views and the relationship has changed in any kind of definitive way. I think it's fair to say two things. One, whatever the Taliban's views on Al-Qaeda, they do know that the last time they harbored Al-Qaeda and it engaged in an outwardly directed attack, an attack on our homeland, certain things followed, which I believe it would have an interest in not seeing repeated. So whatever their views on Al-Qaeda, there is a strong disincentive built in to allow it to engage in outwardly directed attacks, which the assessment of the intelligence community is they're not currently capable of doing. ISIS-K, the other main group, that's a different thing, as you know, because the Taliban and ISIS-K are sworn enemies. And in fact, over the last 5 or 6 years, since the emergence of ISIS-K, the fight has actually been between the Taliban and ISIS-K, with the Taliban taking most of the territory that ISIS-K sought to hold on to in Afghanistan. The question there, I think, is less whether they have the will to deal with ISIS-K and more whether they have the capacity.
Given that response, I know that previously the position of the administration and the State Department was that the 2001 AUMF no longer played a role of significance. But given the developments in Afghanistan and the Taliban's ongoing collaboration with and sympathy with Al-Qaeda and the Haqqani network and like-minded groups, is it not appropriate for the State Department to revisit your recommendation that we abandon the 2001 AUMF?
I think, Senator, we need to look to make sure that we have all the authorities that we would need for any potential contingency, including the reemergence as a threat of Al-Qaeda or the further emergence of ISIS-K as an outwardly directed threat. If we don't have those authorities, we should get them, whether that means relooking at those authorizations or writing new ones, which I think would be the most appropriate thing to do if necessary. We need to look at that.
I appreciate your willingness to change your point of view, in part because the conditions that have developed in the most recent weeks. Nothing wrong with conditions leading to a change in perspective. I for one, thought some years ago that we should withdraw from Afghanistan. The conditions I saw in the ensuing years convinced me that I was wrong. And I, like Senator Shaheen, was one of those that felt that President Trump was wrong to enter into an agreement to withdraw. I thought President Biden was wrong to enter into an agreement or to continue with that agreement to withdraw. And of course, I was appalled by the disastrous withdrawal process itself. For us today, however, I guess I'd like to focus more on the moral stain of leaving people behind. And understand what we can do to make sure that we are not leaving people behind. I understand we're down to a small number of Americans. It's hard to know exactly how many are left behind. But in terms of legal permanent residence, is your priority just as high to get them out as it is to get out citizens? Or is there a different level of commitment for a legal permanent residence return to the United States relative to a citizen?
Senator, our number one priority is American citizens. And that has, I think, long been the case. In this situation in Afghanistan, in this emergency evacuation in Afghanistan, we did everything we could as well to make sure that legal permanent residents, green card holders, would also identify themselves to us. We don't, like with American citizens, we don't know at any given time how many there are in any given country around the world, and to make available resources to help them But our number one priority is any remaining American citizens who wish to leave.
I didn't realize there's a secondary level of priority then for a legal permanent resident. If that's the case, how many of them approximately, you said we don't know the exact number, but how many legal permanent residents are we convinced are still in Afghanistan?
We don't have an exact number, but it's in the
But
thousands.
a round number?
In the thousands.
Pardon?
In the thousands.
In the thousands. Likewise, in terms of SIV holders or SIV applicants, or people who've worked with us that have been our partners through the years, how many of them approximately are still in Afghanistan that want to come to the United States?
So this is what we're doing an accounting of right now, based on two things: based on the pipeline of applicants as it existed before the evacuation, and then looking at those who we were able to evacuate. We don't have those numbers yet because, as we've moved to evacuate people, a number of them are still at transit points around the world. Others, as you
But it would be
know,
tens of thousands?
So, realistically, two things. One, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but of the applicants in the program, and as I said, we inherited about 18,000. About half of those, and this remains more or less the case now, are at a point where it's before the chief of mission has given his or her approval that they are in fact eligible for the program.
I understand.
So we focused on the.
I was looking for a number, and I guess the question I was leading to was this, which is, given the fact that the SIV process was so slow and not undertaken during the Trump years in a significant way, you sped it up. That's great. Although you knew that there was no way you were going to get all these people out in time.
Let me put a final point
given the rapid collapse of the Afghan security forces. And you said yesterday that you inherited a date, but in fact you didn't inherit the date. The date was May 1st, and you pushed it to August 31st. Why didn't you push it much later so that we would have been able to process the SIV applicants as well as those who had worked with us that had not yet applied? I don't understand why a date was actually not inherited and a date was not selected that would be sufficient to actually remove people from the nation in a way that would be in keeping with our moral commitment to honor our citizens, our green card holders, as well as those who've worked with us over the years.
Two things, if I may. First, we took some risk in terms of what the Taliban would do or not do after May 1st in pushing beyond May 1st. And we, of course, worked this very hard because
it's a risk with other people we took.
It's a risk.
The risk was on people we care for.
Just to be clear, if I could, the military told us that in order to do its retrograde, its drawdown from Afghanistan in a safe and orderly way, it needed 3 to 4 months. That's why we pushed to move beyond May 1st and to get to the end of August, early September. Second, to your point, which is an important one and a good one, our expectation was that beyond August 31st, beyond the military drawdown, the government, the security forces, were going to remain in control of Kabul, of the major cities. Our embassy was fully planned to remain up and running. We were leaving about 600 military behind to make sure that we could secure the embassy so that it could continue to operate. We had robust programming planned to include continuing to bring out anyone who wished to leave, notably SIVs. So that was very much the plan and the expectation. What we did not anticipate was that 11-day collapse of the government and security forces. That's what changed everything.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for spending so much time with us. I think what links our failures in Iraq and Afghanistan is that they're both fundamentally failures of hubris, believing that